Hi, I pushed play. I was still swallowing the M&M in my mouth, which are my study snacks. Maybe that should be a question of the week. What are your study snacks? Because M&Ms have definitely become mine. I don't know why. My dog thinks they're for him every time I get some. So this is my M&M bowl. It's empty. That's what I have M&Ms in. Way more than you needed to know. Sorry. Hello. Welcome to week 7. Week 7! So excited. That means a lot of things are due in the next few weeks. So I start to freak out around week 7. But then you're like, oh my gosh, in 3 weeks, this will be over. So, ta-da! Week 7, how is the purpose of higher ed conceptualized? That's our question from Dr. Nelson this week, and how we're looking at our articles and then thinking about the conceptualization of higher education. I think it's such an interesting question, thinking about this, the way we think about higher ed, and then the way we think about money and financial aid, and how we have turned higher education into an acquisition, into a lot of the articles talked about just growing numbers of like higher education, as like more people are going, but there's people who are not persisting, and those folks are from marginalized backgrounds. And in considering this, so looking at how the financial piece goes with persistence and retention, and then also then looking at the Ludke article where she's talking about a different kind of, not financial necessarily, but could be for sure, but a different kind of resource and a different way of thinking about higher education as we conceptualize it. So I think in this very capitalistic way, we do think of higher ed as you pay money for something, you get it. Especially now. Right now, schools are struggling, trying to figure out how to make the knowledge, the education that they provide, how to make that worth it for students in a virtual world, as we continue to think through, what we're going to do in the fall, and knowing that a lot of schools can't afford to not open back up as they normally would, but knowing that really and truly not much has changed in the world since we closed all of our doors, except for the need for that kind of transaction to continue to take place. Going off on a totally different topic, but I think it relates in terms of how the purpose of higher ed and how we have conceptualized it. And throughout my program, we've talked a lot about the purpose of higher ed, and is it for the common good, or was it conceptualized for, as it was conceptualized for rich white men to be able to do what they wanted to do, or actually be able to inherit where they needed to inherit. And then it evolved into something that we once looked at as for everyone, wanted to make higher education available to make our society a better place. And highly educated populations result in some really great things. And yet, and these articles talk about this, we are deciding who gets our financial resources in ways that aren't thoughtful of everyone who could go to higher ed, and our just overall the cost of higher education is absolutely exclusive and makes it only accessible for again those rich white men, oftentimes, as as things are considered, but certainly for people who are upper middle class or middle class. And anyway, going off of that. So two of the articles, right? The Chen article and the Goldrick-Rab article are talking about actual financial aid, actual funding. We, learned lots of things about how the limitations of data sets, things like they're not following students all the way through. So the Chen article is talking about that did a longitudinal study following these students to see what impacted that they're leaving the system altogether, and found some limitations to that because they don't follow students long enough or don't follow students into the individual stories that students have about why they need to leave school. And students have lots of reasons why they may not continue, and sometimes that's hard to get to from a data set. Sometimes that's hard to get to just not knowing the story that every student is telling. And kind of what I got out of these was, a lot, and looking at in particular, the Ludke article as a qualitative study, and then the Chen article as a quantitative study, just what you can get to in different ways. You can get lots of data from lots of different people, so it helps put a story together, and then smaller qualitative study, but really rich in detail and kind of how do they reflect each other. But overall, I thought in terms of the two articles on financial aid is what financial aid can do is make it so that while we may not be able to get to the specific what it is impacting in students, what it can do, and what these have shown me overall, is what financial aid should be aiming for is to not be the reason why students do not continue in higher ed. And that can come with policy changes, that can come with institutions really looking at how they're distributing financial aid, things like that. But it's more of a look at what it should be aiming to not do necessarily. And the focus should be on grants, that was pretty explicit, because different people look at money in different ways, right? And Dr. Nelson said this the other day, $100 for one person is $100 if you give two different people $100, it is seen as very different money. And so the focus on grants, the focus on helping students and to go with the Ludke article, looking at students in an asset-based, what are they bringing to campuses, and what can we, by helping them be on our campuses, what can we learn and gain from them? But right now, we're focusing on loans, we're focusing on tax breaks, we're focusing on merit, and that, okay, sorry. My partner just opened the garage door, which Decker loses his mind. So yes, anyway, focusing on assets, focusing on what else is important. And that's what I loved about the Ludke article, is that the system of students sharing their knowledge that they're gaining in higher ed and giving it back to their families. I'm excited to have this discussion. Okay, I'm going to just stop because this is fun. But I can't wait to discuss it with you. I am excited. I really enjoyed these articles, and I think that this is a really rich discussion to have. So I will stop blabbing about it, and I will wait to talk with you all about it.